Okay, so you want to really get a handle on something quickly, but, properly,
Right.
without getting lost in all the extra stuff.
Right. Cut through the noise.
Exactly. And that's what we're aiming for today. We're doing a deep dive into the artist Bob Camblin, using the materials you sent over.
And they're really interesting materials. We've got pieces from a retrospective, which gives us that kind of timeline view.
Mhm.
And then this fantastic collection of his own words, quotes, writings. It feels much more, well, direct, like hearing from him.
Yeah, it does. So our mission here isn't just to list facts about Camblin.
No.
We want to pull out those really key ideas, the moments, the perspectives that shaped him, based just on what we have here, and maybe connect some dots, have a few aha moments along the way.
Sounds good. Let's maybe start with the early career stuff. That retrospective piece mentions 1957.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
1957. It says he was in the 62nd annual exhibition at the Art Institute of Chicago.
Which is pretty major for an artist starting out.
Right. And the painting, Still Life with Pomegranates, it was actually on loan from the Nelson Atkins Museum.
So already getting significant recognition.
Yeah,
Early days, but making waves.
definitely. But what really jumped out at me from that 1957 section was his reading list. While he was in Italy on a Fulbright.
Ah, the Fulbright year. What was he reading?
Okay, get this. Burroughs' Naked Luncheon Junkie, Camus the Stranger, Sartre Being and Nothingness, No Exit, Kafka, The Metamorphosis.
Wow. Okay. That's a heavy dose of existentialism right there.
It's it. And the retrospective actually links this directly to his art.
How so?
It mentions this developing sense of dread destruction,
Hmm.
this idea of an indifferent universe creeping into his work.
You can almost imagine that, can't you? Maybe the colors getting darker
Sure.
or the figures feeling more isolated, reflecting that Camus or Sartre influence.
Yeah, exactly. The text talks about him exploring that contrast between the finality of things, like death, and then the possibility of transformation.
Metamorphosis. Right, that core existentialist tension. Finding meaning when maybe there isn't any inherent meaning. That would absolutely shape a young artist's thinking.
It really sets the scene for his return to the U.S. that September. And then, this is interesting, he takes job as a cartographer.
A map maker with Trans World Airlines, it says, in Kansas City.
Yeah. It feels like such a practical, almost, well, normal job after that intense artistic and philosophical time in Italy.
It does make you wonder, yeah, how did those two worlds fit together for him? Maybe the quotes will give us clues later.
Good point. And then, just a month later, October 57. Sputnik. The whole world shifts, right? The U.S. is shocked. The space age kicks off.
A fundamental change in how humanity saw itself, its place in the universe.
Huge. And you have to think, even if it's not explicitly mentioned in the retrospective like
Yeah.
the books are, that kind of global shift must have seeped in somehow, affected his worldview.
It almost certainly had to, yeah, this sudden vastness opening up, both exciting and maybe a bit terrifying.
And amidst all that, the retrospective also lists like 4 other exhibitions he had in 57,
Right, Rome, Milan, a traveling show.
and one back in Kansas City.
Yeah.
So he's grappling with these huge ideas, starting this practical job, but still very much active on the art scene, internationally even.
It paints a picture of a really dynamic, intellectually curious young artist already engaging with some pretty deep questions.
Okay, so that's 1957, existentialism, early success, Sputnik. A pretty pivotal year, it seems.
Definitely sets a foundation.
So now let's shift to that other document, the collection of his quotes and writings, because this feels like where we get inside his head a bit more, see how those early threads may be developed over time.
Exactly. These offer a different kind of insight, more personal, where to begin, maybe with his thoughts on time.
Oh yeah, that one. Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps.
Yeah, there's that wryness, isn't there? But also, right away, this theme of things not lasting, impermanence.
Yeah, it feels like a recurring idea, like that other bit you mentioned about music fading, the texture of its decay becoming visible.
And even just that simple line about the 3 cottonwood trees being gone, there's a sensitivity there to loss, to the passage of time.
For sure, but then he also seems to find this deep connection between things, like that quote.
The one about the atom and magic?
Yes, look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both.
It's fascinating, isn't it? He's putting science, like fundamental physics, right alongside magic, saying you find truth in both.
It suggests that maybe reality isn't just one thing or the other, that you can access deeper understanding through different routes, logic, intuition, maybe wonder.
Exactly. And it ties into his point about common sense and the perfectly average, doesn't it? Using those to appreciate both science and magic. He's not picking sides.
Right. It's like saying, hey, miracles can happen here and over there. It's not neither.
And then he talks about the sixth sense.
Ah, senza dubio, without a doubt.
Yeah. Trusting that gut feeling, that inner knowing, that intuition that goes beyond just thinking things through. Powerful stuff.
But there's also that tension, isn't there,
Mm.
between that inner soaring and being grounded. That quote, bright day and I soar, how cruel that my soul is attached to this earth and yet.
Oh, yeah. That longing, wanting to transcend but being stuck in a way, that pull between the physical and well, the spiritual or metaphysical.
It feels very central. And it connects to what he says about honesty with oneself.
Mm.
I cannot tell a lie to myself for very long.
And finding completion in nature. Find something in nature that completes you and then surrender. It's about that internal truth, finding solace, finding yourself maybe in the natural world.
And then he connects it back to the art itself. The light is all you need.
Right. And the process. The end is to evolve by doing the best you can. The means is to amplify what you're doing and believe.
It sounds like such a commitment to the work, to the act of creating, believing in that process as a way to evolve.
And it's not just about the making, is it? He also emphasizes things like balance, patience, freedom, silence even.
Yeah, they feel less like just art techniques and more like,
Yeah,
well, a philosophy for how to live, how to navigate everything.
definitely. And speaking of evolution, that bit about his view of art changing, that felt significant.
Oh, yeah, moving from art for art's sake
Good traditional idea.
to art for life's sake or art for my sake or art for survival's sake.
That's a big shift. It suggests art became something much more fundamental for him, not just aesthetics, but tied to his very existence, maybe even a way of coping or surviving.
Yeah, absolutely. And it links to that idea of breaking free from normal thinking patterns. Step off the train of thought.
Right, get off the linear track. He suggests that's where the real power is, where work becomes effortless, joyful even.
So it's about trusting something else, something more intuitive.
Seems like it. And then look how sharp his observations are about people, about how we interact.
Like the story about the person talking about changing the world.
And then just pays for their coffee and leaves. It's such a perfect little sketch of that gap between big talk and, well, everyday action.
And his point about arguing versus communicating.
Yeah, that you might learn something in an argument, but real communication only happens when you stop trying to win, basically, when you move past just being oppositional.
And all through these quotes, you get these little gems of observation about nature. The cosmos waves as me with tree leaves.
Beautiful, isn't it? And the way he describes light, shadow, it's like he's really seeing it, paying deep attention.
It feels like he's trying to connect with something bigger through that attentiveness.
I think so. And then he's so honest about the artistic struggle sometimes.
Like saying looking at his watercolor palette is better than arguing.
Yeah, that. Or even more vulnerably, the painted eye sees more than mine, and God damn it, I see nothing yet.
Yow, that's raw. Acknowledging that block, that feeling of not seeing.
Very much so. And it ties into his thoughts on belief versus knowing.
Right. Believing and knowing are different. He talks about people practicing beliefs they grew up with.
Mystics know something else. It suggests he's after a different kind of understanding, something more direct, more experiential than just belief.
And that ties into his lament about creativity, doesn't it? We all are creative, but we lose our magic in understanding everything instead of knowing.
Oof. Yeah. That's a powerful idea. Like maybe trying too hard to intellectually understand everything actually gets in the way of truly knowing it in a deeper sense, kills the magic.
It suggests some things just can't be grasped by reason alone.
Which maybe connects to his idea of the artist as a free agent.
How so?
Well, maybe that freedom involves stepping outside purely rational frameworks. And then he also hints that art might be moving towards something more participatory.
Yeah, that was interesting. Blurring the lines between artist and audience. Makes you wonder what he meant by that.
It does. But he also had some pretty sharp things to say about the art world itself.
Oh, yeah. Consumer art. The focus on shock and recognition.
Right. Feeling that maybe things like quality, traditional skills were getting lost. You can feel his deep grounding in art history clashing a bit with contemporary trends.
Definitely. And then there's that funny, relatable bit about teaching.
Huh. Yes. The first year, I assumed. The second year, I capitulated. The third year, I'm teaching.
Anyone who's taught probably gets that.
Totally. But then he swings back to these really deep metaphorical thoughts.
Like the ego. hidden and following you as gracefully as a goldfish's shit.
I mean, what an image, unforgettable, and kind of perfectly captures that idea of the ego just trailing along, unwanted, but always there.
It really does. And then
Yeah.
later on, these bigger concepts seem to emerge, like the hologram.
Yeah, that seems to be about interconnectedness, right? How the parts make up the whole, how everything fits together to give a complete picture.
And time travel at the speed of enlightenment. That
Yeah,
sounds
kind of.
almost mystical.
It does. It points towards those later reflections, I think, about learning, about failure.
Resist learning, learn to fail, learn to relax, learn to feel, learn how to really think.
It's a call to embrace a different way of being, isn't it? More intuitive, more feeling-based, less just rote learning.
Absolutely. And that final quote you highlighted about the Zen monks.
Right. That we're always the Buddha, but we keep forgetting. And Camlin saying, I knew that, but now I know it.
It feels like a destination reached somehow,
Yeah.
a culmination of that lifelong seeking.
It really does. So if we try to weave it all together, that early encounter with existentialism back in 57,
That sense of the indifferent universe.
maybe that really did plant the seeds for his whole life's questioning, his search for meaning, for connection.
And maybe even Sputnik, that sudden glimpse of the vast cosmos.
Hmm.
Maybe that subtly fed into his later ideas about interconnectedness, the hologram, that bigger reality.
It seems entirely possible, yeah. You see that tension playing out all through the quotes, don't you?
Definitely. Between the concrete and the abstract, the personal struggles and these universal questions, between doubt and that deep intuitive certainty.
Those early experiences we talked about, the reading, the art world, the historical moment, they really seem to echo through his entire artistic and philosophical journey based on these writings.
It feels like for Camblin, art wasn't just about making nice pictures.
Not at all. It was
Yeah.
his way of wrestling with, well, with existence itself, trying to find some understanding, some meaning in a world that felt both incredibly beautiful and deeply confusing at times.
So maybe the big takeaway here, looking at these materials you brought,
Hmm.
is that really getting something, that deep dive,
Yeah.
it isn't just about facts.
Right. It's about the connection.
Yeah, those aha moments when different pieces click together, when something from his early life sheds light on a later quote, or vice versa. And maybe that illuminates something for us too about how we see the world.
So perhaps the question to leave with is, which of Camblin's ideas really stuck with you? Which ones sparked something? And, maybe more importantly, why?